Commutation Readings are made possible thanks to viewers like you. Please visit us at commutationconstruct.locals.com. Memberships are free to start with coupon code CCFREE. Hello and welcome to the third Federalist Paper reading in our series on it, the Commutation Readings. It's good to be back with you guys. I'm happy to get a chance to read this. This is, of course, going to be actually continuing the same subject as last time. This is concerning dangers from foreign force and influence, part 2, again by Publius, also known as John Jay, who was our first Chief of Justice in the U.S., which actually makes this rather funny to me because of how flowery his language is, that this person would end up being the original Chief Justice we had. So that gives a little bit of extra context to these initial Federalist Papers, that this person is a judge. He was our first highest judge, and I believe that it'll really give us some interesting context, at the very least, to consider this with. So let's just jump on into it. To the people of the state of New York. It is not a new observation that the people of any country, if, like the Americans, intelligent and well-informed, seldom adopt and steadily preserve for many years in an erroneous opinion respecting their interests. That consideration naturally tends to create great respect for the high opinion which the people of America have so long and uniformly entertained of the importance of their continuing firmly united under one federal government, vested with sufficient powers for all general and national purposes. So, right here, he's basically saying anyone with any sense of wisdom will correct any mistakes they make whenever it interests them. If they're trying to serve themselves, they don't want to end up going about it wrongly once they realize they're doing something wrong. So this is essentially, based on my understanding, a reading that the purpose of the Constitution is to correct the mistakes of the Articles of Confederation. That is the message here, what I am getting from it. Again, remember, you guys, if you do not have the same interpretations as me, that I actually see that as a good thing. I would love to hear your opinions in the comments. So be sure to leave a comment when you're going through this, whether on YouTube, BitChute, Minds, or anywhere. Be sure to leave that comment below. Anyhow, continuing on. The more attentively I consider and investigate the reasons which appear to have given birth to this opinion, the more I become convinced that they are cogent and conclusive. Okay, so he's continuing to be more and more convinced of the goodness of the Constitution. Good to know the first Chief of Justice feels that way. Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be the first. The safety of the people doubtless has relation to a great variety of circumstances and considerations, and consequently affords great latitudes to those who wish to define it precisely and comprehensively. This is an interesting line because it kind of admits to something. Sorry, having a bit of a tough time breathing today. I have a little bit of asthma, but yeah, so this article is saying something interesting here, because it sounds to me like he's outright admitting that the purpose of the change to the Constitution is all about people wanting to have more and more safety. So this kind of leans into an interesting aspect of governance, because there's a question of how much liberty are people willing to give up for the purpose of gaining more safety. I've discussed this topic before on locals.com, where I brought up the fact that the way I see it, there is a bit of a supply and demand curve for liberty and security. So it essentially sounds like he's saying that the U.S. isn't at the equilibrium. The Articles of Confederation did not put us at the equilibrium where people are happy with the safety that they're being guaranteed. The problem with this is that the model of providing more and more safety can always be done by giving more and more power to the government. So this is actually a scary argument for me to be reading from the first U.S. Chief of Justice, from Publius here. It is scary to me to know that he sees safety as such a primary feature of government, because governments can always gather more safety by taking more power and rescinding more rights. That's just a thought that this immediately brought up to me, but I want to bring this out because he's basically saying that the original Articles of Confederation did not outline properly the circumstances and considerations for the safeties to be provided, and perhaps the liberties that would be subject to the regulations of these securities. At present, I only mean to consider it as it respects security for the preservation of peace and tranquility. So says every dictator. I just want to be honest about that. Like, that's kind of my opinion. Almost everyone will use the respects of security to preserve peace and tranquility. That is a line that is used endlessly, and I see that as a dangerous tale to tell. So let's continue. As well against dangers from foreign armies and influences, as from dangers of the like kind arising from domestic causes. As the former of these comes first in order, it is proper it should be the first discussed. Let us therefore proceed to examine whether the people are not right in their opinion that a cordial union under an efficient national government affords them the best security that can be devised against hostilities from abroad. Well, I am glad to see that he is finally covering the actual subject of foreign force and influence. But this seems to be a bit of a redundant question, because the answer is obviously yes. The stricter and stronger a national government may be, the stricter and stronger any government may be, the more it is able to do about foreign influences, foreign hostilities. Because when you have the stronger government, you have a consolidation of power. It gives you more of an equal force, or more of even a more powerful force to combat any force coming towards you. That's kind of my rudimentary thoughts on just what was said right there. All right, let's continue. The number of wars which have happened or will happen in the world will always be found to be in proportion to the number and weight of the causes, whether real or pretended, which provoke or invite them. If this remark be just, it becomes useful to inquire whether so many just causes of war are likely to be given by united America as by disunited America. For if it should turn out that united America will probably give the fewest, then it will follow that in this respect the Union tends most to preserve the people in a state of peace with other nations. Okay, this is an interesting argument, and you will note he is essentially acting that the Articles of Confederation will fall apart, guaranteed. That is the perspective with which Publius is approaching this topic. He is speaking, the way he is writing this, He's very clearly saying, we will disunite. The alternative to this Constitution is us disuniting. That is important to recognize. So considering that, when we look at this, we see that he essentially is saying that the total number of wars that will ever happen will be less if we are one union. Which is true, because you're basically saying there will be fewer, if no, interstate conflicts. So we're not going to have our different states falling to war with one another. So other than the one time we literally broke apart, disunited, and immediately went to war, that almost serves to prove the point that breaking apart will potentially lead to war. So this is an interesting question, because it also stems like, would the individual states be invaded more? Probably. They would almost certainly be more likely to be invaded by foreign influences. What could be done to prevent that? I don't know. But it makes sense that if there's more active leading bodies, then there will be more active conflict between leading bodies. The sheer numbers conclude that. Without the unifying force, there is a divergence, and there is more conflict thereby, by default. Though I don't like that he's automatically claiming that we will disunite if the Constitution failed. That seems to be a bit of a. I'm not going to say it's a stretch, but because I was not there to know the context of the time. I do not know what the people were feeling at the time, how the people felt about the Articles of Confederation. I have skimmed over some of the Articles of Confederation myself, but I don't know how people felt about them. And this just kind of gives a little bit of perspective, because the Federalists are approaching this from the position of the Union will fall apart, guaranteed, without the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists come from a position of, we do not need a new Constitution because we are together. It's in our best interest to be together, and we will never fall apart. So that's kind of, that is an interesting dynamic going on here, and it's worth keeping in mind. All right, moving forward. The just causes of war, for the most part, arise either from violation of treaties or from direct violence. America has already formed treaties with no less than 6 foreign nations, and all of them, except Prussia, are maritime and therefore able to annoy and injure us. She has also extensive commerce with Portugal, Spain, and Britain, and with respect to the two latter, has, in addition, the circumstance of neighborhood to attend to. So, I do believe that when it's talking about the circumstance of neighborhood to attend to, Britain has territory in Canada still, and Spain has territory in Florida, actually, at this time, and Mexico, so South America, or south of the USA, Spanish to the south, and the Brits and French to the north. So that's kind of, so I like this argument. This is a good argument for keeping the U.S. together, though I'm not feeling an argument for the Constitution over the Articles of Confederation here, though I think I don't believe that's something we're probably ever going to get, just because of the framing of this as, without the Constitution, we are not a united country anymore. Just worth noting, though I do think it's important to also consider John Jay benefited significantly from the adoption of the Constitution. He got a lot more power by becoming the first Chief of Justice. He's also the one who established judicial review and all these different aspects that weren't outlined necessarily in the Constitution. So there's a question of how much you should trust John Jay. So there's a lot of there's a lot of questions here, and I want to bring this up to be kind of critical, and I should do this more for the Anti-Federalist Papers too. I haven't been too terribly critical of those, mostly because I am a super fanboy of the Bill of Rights. I think that's one of the greatest documents ever. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from, and I will try to do better as I continue through this. Anyhow, it is of high importance to the peace of America that she observe the laws of nations towards all these powers, and to me it appears evident that this will be more perfectly and punctually done by one national government than it could be either by 13 separate states or by 3 or 4 distinct confederacies. Again, he keeps bringing up the idea that the U.S. would break into multiple different confederacies or just a bunch of different states. I don't know too much about what was going on to incite this belief, but it is something I will look into. And for the purpose of treaties, it does make sense to have just one nation dealing with one other nation rather than many dealing with one. That it kind of gives more of a balance, and it also gives a balance of power in terms of what you can get from both sides. So by breaking apart, you have less to offer the other great power. So if you yourself are together and kind of form your own great power through the union of states, then you can compete on more equal footing with the other great powers. There is value in that, the way I see it. All right. Because when once an efficient national government is established, the best men in the country will not only consent to serve, but also will generally be appointed to manage it. For although town or country or other contracted influence may place men in state assemblies, or senates, or courts of justice, or executive departments, yet more general and extensive reputation for talents and other qualifications will be necessary to recommend men to offices under the national government, especially as it will have the widest field for choice, and never experience that want of proper persons which is not uncommon in some of the states. Hence, it will result that the administration, the political councils, and the judicial decisions of the national government will be more wise, systematic, and judicious than those of individual states, and consequently more satisfied with respect to other nations, as well as more safe with respect to us. Okay. This is... The argument sounds like it makes sense until you understand people. Because this is assuming that because you have a broader net, you'll catch a better fish, a higher quality fish. But yeah, so that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. It doesn't necessarily mean once you have one good aspect that you will be guaranteed to have more good if you put those together. Individual states have the ability to really fine-tune who they're looking for. They have the ability to, because of their size, they're able to really get to know the individuals and all their goals. And there's a problem with scale here, because Well, yes, it makes sense that, if we have all these variety of different opinions, we're going to be able to choose the wisest person. At the same time, you're probably just going to end up finding the person who can appease the most people. Not necessarily the wisest, maybe the most street smart, or the most, what's a good way to put it? The most just Trump. I'm afraid that's the only way I can really put it. Like, can anyone say in modern times that Trump or Biden are the wisest among us? If they are, Lord help us. But yeah, it definitely seems like this is assuming a high sense of honor, pride, and virtue are maintained throughout a society, and it doesn't account for how societies change. It doesn't account for how culture changes, or how people really just, the broader something is, the more generic things end up becoming, the less people really pay attention, kind of. Plus, the federal government also has a bit of an out of sight, out of mind effect with some people, because you're not dealing with what the federal government is doing on a day-to-day basis. So people don't necessarily pay as much attention. You are dealing with your local communities and your local, like, administrations of government fairly frequently. It has a very active effect on you. The only way the federal government has a really active effect in your life in the modern times is through federal taxes. Maybe with federal benefits that you're getting. But again, a lot of benefits that people get are state level, or they're organized by the state. Maybe they're instituted federally, but the states decide what you're going to get, what the qualifications for those benefits are, things like unemployment and whatnot. So that's kind of, I see what he's going for here. I don't think it holds up. And we have the benefit of hindsight to be able to comment on this, but I feel like Publius made a very he made a very specific type of argument here to try to convince people of something, and it doesn't feel like it's thought out as well as he thought it out. It's definitely an idyllic view of how society should run, as opposed to a realistic one. All right. Yeah, all right. Continuing with the next paragraph. Yeah, okay, I had to finish that. Okay. Because under the national government, treaties and articles of treaties, as well as the laws of nations, will always be expounded in one sense and executed in the same manner, whereas adjudications, I said it, got through it, whereas adjudications on the same points and questions in 13 states or in 3 or 4 confederacies will not always accord or be consistent, and that as well from the variety of independent courts and judges appointed by different and independent governments, as from the different local laws and interests which may affect and influence them, the wisdom of the convention in committing such questions to the jurisdiction and judgment of courts appointed by and responsible only to one national government cannot be too much commended. So there's the idea that the uniformity will allow people to travel between states essentially and and have a general idea of what the laws are. There isn't gonna be a confounding aspect of deliberation. There isn't gonna be what are our laws? What are our trades gonna be between different states? What are tariffs gonna be? All these different kind of aspects. It's gonna be one kind of uniform feel to the country, in a way, that you won't necessarily get if you break apart, or that you almost assuredly will not get if you break apart. So that's what I'm going to take from that. Because even if the governing part... Did I skip something? Yes, I did. because the prospect of present loss or advantage may often tempt the governing party in one or two states to swerve from good faith and justice, but those temptations not reaching the other states and consequently having little or no influence on the national government, the temptation will be fruitless and good faith and justice be preserved. The case of the Treaty of Peace with Britain adds great weight to this reasoning. I want to get to that. I want to see if he's going to comment on the treaty with Britain. I don't think he will, but it does bring a point that the individual states can't kind of like make deals with other countries that screw over the rest of the states. Yeah, that makes sense. It's curious, but I think I'll leave that there for now. Because even if the governing party in the state should be disposed to resist such temptations, yet as such temptations may, and commonly do, result from circumstances peculiar to the state, and may affect a great number of the inhabitants, the governing party may not always be able, if willing, to prevent the injustice mediated, or to punish the aggressors. But the national government, not being affected by those local circumstances, will neither be indeed induced to commit the wrong themselves, nor want power or inclination to prevent or punish its commission by others. So it's somewhat insinuating that, again, if we break up, the individual states can kind of screw each other over, and state legislatures will kind of may look the other way towards these kind of things because they know it benefits the state for them to do that. But if you make things like treaties national, then the government can't really screw over the other states because they're doing for all states. It sounds like a valid argument. Again, though, based on the moneyed interest in politics these days, clearly that without the nationalism sense, the strong sense of nationalism that the people here have, there is a problem with this argument, because the fact of the matter is that in modern times, we are in a very globalist society, and under globalism, this will not hold up. The idea that people will not take commissions or bribes or anything, I mean, just look at the Hunter Biden scandals. Look at those. Even if you say that Biden wasn't getting money even if you deny that Biden was getting money for any of this stuff, Hunter Biden admitted to getting positions by using his family name, which means he was getting positions because people believed they could get access to his father through it. And some even thanked him for the ability to speak with his father. There is a great conflict of interest, whether you are on a state level or a national level. Once you're, and the other problem is it assumes that the officials are always acting for the people out of a sense of duty and out of a sense of justice, when in fact the national government is just as likely, especially once you make it a more powerful centralized government, it is just as susceptible to these kind of corruptions as individual states. That's my take. So far, therefore, as either designed or accidental violations of treaties and the laws of nations afford just causes of war, they are less to be apprehended under one general government than under several lesser ones, and in that respect, The former most favors the safety of the people. So again, he's bringing back up safety, and he's making the argument that foreign entities will not, from what I'm getting from this, foreign entities won't break treaties and hurt the people with a large centralized government as much as it would with smaller states. I completely agree with that. That makes perfect sense. Again, there's that power balance, and individual states will not have the power of the full states. And again, we're just going to continue going through this, reading it in good faith that, as he says, without the Constitution, the federal government would fall apart. The Articles of Confederation would be broken. As to those just causes of war which proceed from direct and unlawful violence, it appears equally clear to me that one good national government affords vastly more security against dangers of that sort than can be derived from any other quarter. All right. Because such violences are more frequently caused by the passions and interests of a part than the whole, of one or two states than of the Union, not a single Indian war has yet been occasioned by aggressions of the present federal government, feeble as it is, but there are several instances of Indian hostilities having been provoked by the improper conduct of individual states who either unable or unwilling to restrain or punish offenses have given occasion to the slaughter of many innocent inhabitants. I appreciate the acknowledgement that the natives are innocent in this. I'm not sure that is something that really matters or goes far for the country past this era, but yeah, it's nice to see that the founders of the Constitution were not happy with the individual states sort of having their own wars with Native Americans. The neighborhood of Spanish and British territories bordering on some states and not on others naturally confines the causes of quarrel and immediately to the borderers. The neighborhood of Spanish and British territories bordering on some states and not on others naturally confines the causes of quarrel and more immediate to the borderers. So the people who are next to each other are going to fight. Yeah. The bordering states, if any, will be those who, under the impulse of sudden irritation and a quick sense of apparent interest or injury, will be most likely, by direct violence, be excited to war with these nations, and nothing can so effectively obviate that danger as a national government whose wisdom and prudence will not diminish by the passions which actuate the parties immediately interested. So again, you give up a bit of local interest for federal interest, which it will help keep the peace, and it does make a little bit of sense. Actually, I would say this is a fairly good argument. This is a good anti-war argument. And I do like seeing all this anti-war stuff, because it's nice to know that our Constitution was designed for us to be pretty anti-war. At least that's what the supporters and founders of it wanted. But not only fewer just causes of war will be given by the national government, but it will also be more in their power to accommodate and settle them amicably. They will be more temperate and cool, and in that respect, as well as in others, will be more in capacity to act advisedly than the offending state. Well, considering Trump is pretty much the first anti-war president in decades at this point, over a generation, Uh, some of these are a bit ironic to read in hindsight. But yeah, there is the consideration that, hey, just because one state gets upset doesn't mean the whole country needs to. Though again, if you look back at World War II, when Hawaii got attacked, the whole country went to war for that. So in the end, it may have actually escalated what the war would be to an extent. It gives the Union more power in the fight, but it also ends up being that instead of just individual states fighting, you end up with the whole other country fighting, which is not a considering that sorry, the thought just left my head. Wow. All right, well, I'll get back to that later. But yeah, the wars can get bigger by the fact that we are unionized. Whereas, so I was saying that just because an individual state gets slighted, it can be that now we're just dragging in the whole nation as opposed to just an individual state. That I guess that's kind of my point. Anyhow, the pride of states as well as of men naturally disposes of them to justify all their actions and opposes their acknowledging, correcting, or repairing their errors and offenses. I think that's the most true thing John Jay has ever said. Good job, Publius. That is that holds up super well today. That's pretty funny. The national government in such cases will not be affected by this pride, but will proceed with moderation and candor to consider and decide on the means most proper to extricate them from the difficulties which threaten them. Whew. I've been working a long time today, so I'm a little lightheaded. Excuse me. But that, again, this is a good sentiment. How much it holds up in practice, I am not sure. Besides, it is well known that acknowledgments, explanations, and compensations are often accepted as satisfactory from a strong united nation, which would be rejected as unsatisfactory if offered by a state or confederacy of little consideration or power. So that was his first strike against the Confederacy itself. He's essentially saying that there can be remuneration for the whole country, like, oh, maybe we didn't need to go to war after Pearl Harbor, maybe we could have just had Japan pay us a couple $1 billion or something, or $1 trillion. I don't think that would be the case, though. To be fair, people were dueling back in this time for purposes of honor. So you could see this as where states might go to war over issues of honor. A federal government might not. Though I would like to consider why a confederacy of little consideration or power would be less. How would a confederacy with little power be more likely to go to war than a more centrally highly powered central government? I don't have an answer for that. That's a very odd claim to me, and I would love to discuss this with someone. So if you guys have any thoughts, again, comments below. If you're liking what we're going through, if you're liking the conversation, give it a like, and make sure to subscribe for more, and visit me on Locals at commutationconstruct.locals.com in order to keep up with this kind of stuff and get even more, as well as being able to speak with me directly. In the year 1685, the state of Genoa, is that Genoa or Genoa? I'm going to go with Genoa. In the year 1685, the state of Genoa, having offered Louis the 14th, endeavored to appease him. He demanded that they should send their dogs or chief magistrate, accompanied by 4 of their senators, to France to ask his pardon and receive his terms. They were obliged to submit to it for the sake of peace. Would he on any occasion either have demanded or have received the like humiliation from Spain or Britain or any other powerful nation? Okay, so it essentially sounds like he's saying that when the state of Genoa, when the state of Genoa offended Louis the 14th, he was offended, and then he basically demanded them to prostrate themselves, to bend over for him. So that, so it's interesting to see that he's essentially making the argument that being a powerful nation, we won't have to face that same kind of consequence, and that makes sense. That does make sense to me, but again, I don't see how. Maybe a confederation of very little power would be subject to that, but if the confederation was a union of powerful states, or even the states of moderate power, where they work together well, I don't see how the confederation necessarily would be weaker in this regard than a federal union. Again, if there are any war experts below, or any experts on diplomacy, I would love to hear from you to talk about this. This is just me kind of going into this, giving it a read through, and I mean, we're already at the end of this Federalist paper. It's a pretty short one, so yeah, it is good to get the chance to talk about all this with you. This was an interesting one because it really did go back and forth between things that really did hold up well today and things that just really didn't, really felt idealistic and based on the ethos of the time, as opposed to a timeless ethos of, well, people change, motivations change. What happens if we get... Well, I suppose there's no way they could really see the bureaucracy and that would enable the sort of corruption that we have today. I suppose there's no way they could see that, but there's also so much better communication today. So I would think that the lack of communication that was available, it's almost like things have been able to become more transparent, and to almost hide that, they pack in all the bureaucracies to sort of obfuscate the transparency that's there, to make it more opaque what's going on. But in general, people can see what's going on within our government. We know about so much corruption and all these different things that are going well, things that are going bad, yada yada yada. So it's a very it's just a read that I think I don't think everything holds up. I'm just gonna say that I don't think everything holds up. I think it was well-spirited, but not necessarily designed to be totally timeless, unfortunately. Anyhow, that is gonna be it for this episode of the Commutation cast, or Commutation Readings. Oof, having one of those days. It's election day. It's got to be one of those days. But just very busy, very crazy stuff going on right now. Anyhow, it's been great talking to you guys. Remember, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Give us a follow on Minds. Hit me up on Twitter or Gab if you like those. And come by Locals, because Locals is the website I am building up. It is where you can become a subscriber, support me, and help make all this possible. Help enable me to build this further. I do one day want to be able to get merch, be able to do all the good creator stuff that you guys will like, and definitely upgrade my rig to be able to get content to you faster, more efficiently, video quality, make it better, and all that jazz. Everything to improve the production capacity and production quality for you guys. So again, commutationconstruct.locals.com. The link is in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. Anyhow, it's been good. See ya.